One Punch Man Chapter 201, the multiverse is confirmed. The cover page for this one is the same as the one we received for the old version of the chapter. I'm surprised Murata gave up the chance to draw a new one for either of the Psychic Sisters. Previously, Empty Void hit Flashy Flash with one of God's cubes. This forced him into a dream where he and Sonic were still kids and successfully left the ninja village together. But this version of Sonic was actually just God in disguise. The fake Sonic extended its hand towards an unsuspecting Kid Flash, but suddenly, the hand closed to form a veiny fist. Flash was taken off guard and was wide-eyed. The next thing he knew, he was being punched in the face. In the real world, Sonic sent Flashy Flash flying with a well-made knuckle sandwich. At the same time, he was circling Empty Void with a triad of after images. The ninja hero caught himself while recoiling from the direct blow. When he looked up, Sonic was guarding him with his sword drawn. That man's eyes were blazing with incredible power that was only dwarfed by the inferno of energy surrounding the cube in his hand. He was surprised by Sonic's ability to resist the cube's influence, and as a devoted follower of God, he found it foolishly blasphemous. Sonic surmised that it must be a form of genjutsu that preys upon a target's emotional dependencies to tempt and coerce them. He obviously had no idea what Flashy Flash saw, but hoped that his fellow ninja wasn't so easily fooled. Flash didn't move a muscle as he considered Sonic's words. The thought of someone of his caliber being emotionally dependent was inconceivable, especially considering the focus of his vision was Sonic and their shared dream. This both disturbed and frustrated the S-Class hero, enough for him to accept a total delusion instead. He returned to Sonic's side while questioning if it wasn't just a telepathic attack that shows them repulsive visions. Flash chalked the whole thing up to being a terrible nightmare. Sonic accepted the fable at face value. Then he pointed out that the guy's nose was bleeding, and that's pretty interesting. In the previous version, Sonic was the one whose nosebleed was pointed out. This was because the Heavenly Ninja Party decided that he was the weaker of the two and mercilessly targeted him. Then he started to bleed from both nostrils. And that happened because he envied Flash's embodiment of ultimate strength through speed. Then he was forced to keep his pride in check after the hero's words of wisdom. Empty Void was now convinced that his former shinobi had become a duo, and the mention of this only added to the blonde ninja's annoyance. Reflecting the village's rules, that man considered it pitiful. According to him, those who are truly confident in their abilities remain peerless. That in pursuit of power's pinnacle, separation is to be expected. And that reflects Saitama's life. He's so strong that he's mentally and emotionally removed from most things. Sonic was very confused by the notion of equals. Flashy Flash wondered if their senior was referring to himself and Blast. Clearly, the idea of being evenly matched never crossed their minds. Empty Void made it clear that he was talking about the people right in front of him. In terms of skill, Flashy Flash is the superior of the two. Yet in regards to heart, Sonic was the clear winner. And this deviance creates a resonating balance between them. Thankfully, in this version of events, the gap between their combat capabilities isn't too major. And in terms of heart, we know that despite being born and raised in the ninja village, Sonic's naturally strong will protected him from their brainwashing. And now, he's trivialized God's influence. In the old version, Sonic's dream was pretty dumb. There were walking, talking monster cells that cooked each other for him, something that Sonic actually hates. This could hardly be considered an attack on his emotional dependencies. And now, we don't even see a dream for him. It's possible that it may come up later, but for now, I'm under the impression that it was outright cut. There is barely any time passage, so Sonic almost instantly refused to be influenced. Meanwhile, Flashy Flash was completely fooled despite the implausibility of them being kids again and half of his life being deemed a bad dream. If he wasn't stopped, Flash would have definitely touched God's hand. And we know from Garo's cosmic transformation that touching it at all is enough to get the job done. God be wanting a party, and you gotta tell him no. Tatsumaki's refusal is sort of like the middle ground between these two. At first, she believed that God was Blast, but then she saw through the inaccuracy of his sentiment and knew he was a fraud. But either way, she was in no condition to take his hand in the first place. Flash and Sonic were both affronted by their senior ninja's comments, and Void was getting sick of them too. That's when Sonic sprung into action. He mentioned the high reputation of the village's founder, something that the monster was hardly living up to with all this talk and underhanded methods. But according to Empty Void, he was the disappointed one, as apparently there was only a single success. Now I want you guys to take note of that. He then decided to finish things quickly and take his leave. He became a void himself, and their blades failed to reach him. The monster slipped through space-time, leaving the speedster ninjas behind with enlarged eyes. He moved incomprehensibly further and further away from them. Before long, he was surrounded by a seemingly endless expanse of alternate moments and outcomes. Each of these orbs contains a different, parallel world, each stemming from infinite possibilities. And all of this is outside the causality of the universe, which is to say that cause and effect are not in play. This is insane. So every redraw we have ever seen may be considered an alternate universe. Somewhere in the multiverse, Garo sat down with Saitama to talk things out instead of fighting. This opens a crazy can of worms that I am still trying to wrap my head around. The implications of this are game-changing. There is a lot to unpack there, so we'll go in depth with all that in separate videos. For now, I want to focus on that single success Void mentioned. Contextually, it seems like in one timeline, God's power was accepted. This could be both Flash and Sonic in one world, or a single individual. Either way, that is a very scary and exciting prospect. Empty Void then set his sights on a particular bubble that contained a version of Flash and Sonic. Empty Void began weaving hand seals so rapidly that he left after images. He was in the process of folding entire dimensions and summoning the power of a certain jutsu. Like a wrathful deity, the villain drew one of his twin blades to besiege this new reality from the outside. In response, Flash's instinct screamed at him. This is the same reaction and accompanying visuals that we saw from Blast back at Hero Association headquarters. It seems like being predisposed to that man's attack allowed Flash to anticipate this one. He cried out to Sonic and told him that an attack was on the way. He insisted that his old friend be careful, but the Slash attack was already hurtling in their direction. Dimension Slash! The world itself was carved into. Despite his prior anticipation, Flashy Flash was still cut, but Sonic's fate was far worse. Flashy Flash could only look on in horror at the bisected body of his childhood friend. Flash couldn't believe his eyes and screamed Sonic's name. From there, Empty Void entered the dimension. He told an overwhelmed Flashy Flash that he cannot go against the will of the Holy Hand. He insisted that Flashy Flash join him in the extermination of humanity. The Fiend promised to use his Dimension Slash from hyperspace to cleanse the planet's surface. Then he moved the cube towards the ninja's bewildered face. And that's when Blast punched him in the face with Gravity Knuckle. The monster was sent hurtling away. This caused a practically explosive scattering of trash. Flashy Flash was stammering while on the ground and calling out to Blast. Empty Void had been lodged below the surface, and with a rush of power, he moved it all away from himself, regaining his freedom. Veins began to bulge on his organic armor as he angrily acknowledged his former partner. At the same time, Flashy Flash was surprised to see his old friend was alive, and Sonic was very confused by what he just experienced. Blast stuck his tongue out at Void and mocked him for being fooled. It turns out that he just hit Sonic's upper body with a dimensional gate, and the fact that he can do that without splitting someone in two is impressive. That man could only look on in frustration. Sonic wondered how Blast knew about their location at all. Blast admitted that the wording of the letter Flashy Flash received seemed pretty strange, so he pretended to warp away. But in reality, he used his warp abilities to follow his fellow hero from above. And the fact that he managed to do this while going unnoticed by the trained senses of Flashy Flash is also very impressive. But Blast did not mention that he lost track of his mark about halfway through due to the fog. The Dimension Slash was what gave their location away. So maybe the alarm that Blast gave to Flashy Flash will come up at a later point. It is still in this version of events after all. Whatever the case, Blast placed his hands on the shoulders of Sonic and Flash. He commended them both for overcoming the cube's temptation, and according to him, they pass. That is a pretty exciting declaration. Back when Flashy Flash expressed his desire to join Blast's fight against God, the top hero refused. Due to the loss of his partner to God's temptation, he wasn't willing to accept Flash. But now, they've made the cut. When we inevitably begin to properly explore other dimensions, we can expect Blast to trust the likes of Flashy Flash, Speed Sonic, Tatsumaki, and Saitama. And now, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that with this chapter, we are finally done with the redraws and can return to uncharted territory. The bad news is that the One Punch Man manga will be on break for 2 months. It seems like Murata's many obligations may be complicating the production of things, but that doesn't mean we won't be getting any new webcomic content in the meanwhile. And hopefully in 2 months, we'll know more about the release of the anime's 3rd season. That way, the anime and manga hype can rise at the same time. And thankfully, the implications of this one have given us no shortage of things to discuss. Now, I know you guys are going to be sad about us not having more from the story for a while, so feel free to let it all out in the comments, because I am right there with you. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. I love you.